Good morning and welcome to another session, Rumination with Andrew. It's indeed my pleasure to be with you one more time. Now, this is an incredible matter that we're going to talk about, and it is the issue of education, right? And the fact that we are seeing a war, a literal war being waged on academia, right? On the academy, as we often say, particularly in the realm of higher education. But I should say that's also at the lower levels, also in elementary, from elementary to the higher levels of education. Now, by now we would have known that Claudine Gay has retired, not retired, but has resigned from her position because of the incredible amount of what should I say, pressure that came on her to do so. Now, one of the things is that I'm also not particularly, sorry for what is happening to Claudine Gay too, because Claudine Gay was on the other side of this work philosophy of, not knowing the difference between a man and a woman and all of these nonsensical, philosophical framework. So sometimes when you find yourself not, tethered, not, attached to reality, which I think that our educational system for the most part is not attached to reality, right? This academic, language and legalese that we tend to use is far removed from the reality. And I have been saying this for a long, long time, but I've also said this on the channel, on this channel, that our education system is not geared towards solving the problems that we have in the world, right? They are too proud and arrogant to think that the ascribing to a particular philosophy, to a particular ideology, will be able to solve the world's problem. And I'm not suggesting here that you might not take aspect, or paragraph or so, or, particular framework from that particular theory. But you cannot use, particularly a theory that is coming from a cultural understanding, a cultural awareness, and think that it's going to be applicable to all cultural experiences and norms and realities. And often that is what our academics believe. Even when you're writing your PhD and master's thesis, this pressure to, stick to this particular theoretical framework is, to me, nonsense too. Because sometimes what you're writing about is not applicable to any of those theoretical framework. But that is what your professor loves, and that's the theory that he or she's inclined to working with, and you've got to do it. Or if you don't do it, then bye-bye, you won't be getting your PhD or you won't be getting your master's, right? That is how our educational system operates, right? And we have people graduating who are largely programmable machines, right? They're not people who have the capacity to think and to think independently, to have the critical levels of understanding of our societies. But they have a doctor or master's or whatever they have behind their names, right? And people tend to respect them because of those titles, right? Not understanding that they do not have the requisite critical thinking skills that they should have. But what they have are, some superficial understanding of the world, or their professors' understanding of the world, And, I've heard people, even when the three professors from these Ivy League schools were in Congress, when they were actually reporting or giving their understanding, their opinions on the free speech matter of, towards the Jews. And some of these podcasts, and I think I do see what they're saying, some of these individuals who are critiquing what happened in Congress, with these professors. I remember Glenn Greenwald, he's suggesting that these professors are so academic that they cannot, frame a sentence that would have debunked the ideology posed to them by by Stephanie, right? They were so caught up with academic legalese, and so they weren't able to, merge their thoughts with reality, with what is pragmatic reality. And that is something that is interesting, and it is perhaps true, right? Sometimes, you see books written and filled with all these theoretical frameworks you know, and there is really nothing. It's empty, because it's not saying anything, right? And that is what the education that was given by Christ. You could see that the Pharisees and the Sadducees and these rabbis in the times of the Jews when Christ came to the earth, they had studied also the philosophies, even though they were inclined that they were, men and women of God. They also were highly, you know, they indoctrinated, I should say, into the philosophy of Greek, right? The Greek philosophers, right? And they understood them, and their worldview, even though they were Jews, they tended to have more, welded, I should say, with some of those philosophies. But the fact of the matter is that when the ordinary people, including the academics, the so-called philosophers like Nicodemus, listened to Christ, they say, what manner of man is this? They say, we have never heard any man spoke as he, Christ, spoke. His words were filled with authority. Yes, he was God, right? He was the man, he was God in the flesh. However, the fact of the matter is that he was coming from a real perspective, and he used real things like the lilies of the valleys and the plants and the herbs and all of these things to present his points, right? Which have caused many of us who even are educated to think, to have to ponder, to have to dig deep into an understanding of what Christ was saying, right? But he started from the simple, and then he moved, and that simple moves you to the complex, the complex thought processes, right? And that is what a standard education should be about. But instead, we have all of these complex issues, right? And people don't even understand the simple matters that we have to deal with. And that is why we can't understand, we can't have good health, because we don't look at the root cause of medicine. Because really and truly, our health is not hard to take care of, and medicine is not a hard science. We are the ones who have made it into a hard science, right? And we have made this science so hard that we ourselves don't even know how to take care of our bodies. And we have so worshipped and idolized our medical doctors that they can do anything with us, because we think that they've studied all this calculus and they've done all of this studies at medical school, and sets them apart from the populace. But if you should go to, for example, a naturopathic doctor, right, or a homeopath, you will see that there are simple things that they use. And they practice holistic medicine. Is that some things that they have to think? Yes, they have to think. And they have to see how one medication works against other and its effectiveness, etc., etc. But it's not complicated as we think it is, right? That we have to do always clinical trials, and we have to, study this one drug, and we have all these drugs for different pain. Not that difficult, but we have made it difficult. Another thing let us look at the economic realm, right? We know that if you have an economy in which you are spending more than you have, then it's going to tanker, right? And so often we see our politicians, building up these debts, and not understanding that one day the chickens will come home to roost, right? And the economy will implode. But they keep doing that, and they keep on giving us these economic frameworks and philosophers and philosophies and theoreticians, and and that we should, because according to that theoretician, that's what he says, right? And it does not make any sense, right? We've got to ensure that our educational system merges its philosophies with the ordinary realities of life. And we have not done that in recent times. And I would say that it has been happening now for decades too, right? Because I was concerned from I was in graduate school from the early 2000s that our educational system was a farce, right? And that it was not geared towards serious critical thinking and understanding, right? Now, I saw this article written by Jeffrey Tucker. It's Jeffrey A. Tucker, and he is, I think, the editor of the Brownstone Institute. I hope that they will not put down this video because they might say that, oh, the Brownstone Institute is not a newspaper that they prescribe to, right? But let's look at the few thoughts that he is sharing with us about the state of education in America. Now, he's not talking about the world because he's an American and he's looking at the state, but it can be applied to the world. Now, he's also here, the title of the article is "A Real Purge in Academia," right? And he talks about the fact that there's a book, he's highlighting here a book, Conformity Colleges, The Destruction of Intellectual Creativity and Dissent in America's Universities. And this is the author of this book is David R. Beinheiser from the Skyhorse Publishing Company. And that was published in 2013. So from very far, people have realized that there is a sort of conformity in the educational system, particularly at the higher level, and that people come out all believing the same thing for the most part, which is not what an education is all about, right? There should be some amount of dissent, right? Not to the sense that we're going to all disagree with everything everybody says, and we're not going to have some established facts and norms and cultural values and attitudes, right? But we cannot say that, oh, because this person said that this medication works, it means that this is going to work for me. It might work for you, but it might not work for me. This economic framework of Marxism might work for one country, but it might not work for another, right? Democratic socialism might not work for the United States, but it might work for Jamaica, right? So that is what we need to understand. We cannot say that all realities and all societies are the same and that we need to be governed equally in the same manner. And be careful of this philosophy of we're all equal, right? Equity and all of that stuff. Yeah, we're all equal as human beings, but we don't all have equal realities, equal opportunities. We don't have equal intellectual capacities, right? And we must understand that. And these are some of the problems with communism, right? That people have highlighted, but the people who are so indoctrinated into that philosophy think that, yeah, it works. And well, it's mumbo jumbo, really, if it's studied properly and you reflect on it intellectually and critically. Now, he says COVID feels like a turning point, a time when universities fully embrace the ideology of control, censorship, and compulsion represented by universal quarantines, masking, and vaccine compliance, all rooted in symbolism rather than scientific realities. And yet this period might be more so correctly seen as it is in this brilliant book by David Bornheiser, as a codification of deep problems that already existed. So it means, therefore, that this conformity that we had to practice during COVID is sort of, has normalized how we should behave, right? And we should listen to our authorities and we should say what they tell us to do. And all members of society will have to follow or they will suffer the consequences or bear the consequences of the law. So the purge of dissident voices opposed to the progressive woke religion began many years ago, if not earlier. So even from the 1950s, William F. Buckley Jr., God and Man at Yale, 1951, observed vast problems at Yale University, which he attributed to the deification of intellectual freedom. Even he could not anticipate that this freedom was only a plea for maximum opportunity for full control, right? And then he begins to talk about, COVID offered an opportunity to complete the purge. There were 43 rounds of it. It began with quarantines and solitary confinement. One must be willing to impose it, celebrate it, and endure it in order to enter the gates of woke heaven, right? And we saw that that is so. It's either you did it, and if you did it, you would have come out of this pandemic. Did we really come out of the pandemic? I would leave that for you to answer. Now, the university experience is something people think they still understand and value. This is a leftover from the past, a romanticized conception that bears little in common with existing realities, right? So he's suggesting here that our understanding of the university is still centered in what the conception of what university should be in the past, but the realities of modern times do not bear true in light of what we're seeing in our universities, right? The medieval conception of the university institutionally flowing from monastic experience was that the final truth did exist in a unified whole, but it was elusive of comprehensive understanding due to the fallibility of the human mind, right? So we need to understand that, which is to some extent true, that no matter how much we delve into, the universe or into the world in which we live, right? We are not going to understand everything because we're so limited and we're fallible creatures. But I think we have this notion in recent times that we do have the ability, that we are infallible like God is. And therefore, people will say to you, science is the thing you need to aspire to. And that is not what science says, right? Because if you present your faith, and faith is not something that is dead, right? I need to talk about faith and all of that won't be this, because people have this thing that faith means blind faith, but God doesn't ask anybody to have blind faith. God presents the evidence to you, right? And he expects that you will accept that these are the evidence based on what he, the infallible God, has presented to you, and you believe, and then you practice, just like the scientist presents the evidence to you. And if he says that hydroxychloroquine, or if he says that remdesivir works, then he expects that you will trust him, having done the research, having done the clinical studies, that you will also trust him that remdesivir is efficacious in the fight against COVID. So that is what you are doing to. You are also being faithful. This is faith because you weren't there to do the clinical trials. You don't know if he really said what he did. And the same thing, God said that he created, right? And that we need to believe. Now, when you look around, you can see that there is creation, right? And it's a wide field. And we're saying, no man or no, ordinary being would have been able to do what God has done. The same thing we'd say when you look at some products, like maybe the computer or some of the great things that men have, invented. You're saying that this is no ordinary mind behind this, right? And so because of that, you trust the instructions, the manual that you've got. You trust the instruction that this is what needs to be done, right? The objective of intellectual work was to discover ever more facets of it, elucidate them to students to develop a tradition of thought and gradually put together systems of thought that point to that truth, right? So whatever the discipline, math, music, logic, theology, biology, medicine, they were united in a confidence that if some feature of truth was discerned, it could not and would not live in contradiction to the final and universal truth, which was God. This confidence, this mission underscored an ethos of investigation and teaching. It was to be at once humble and fearless, imaginative, but governed by methodological rules, creative, but also cumulative. And out of this paradigm was born the idea of science. Every sector of specialization benefited from it. Now, so he's giving you a historical understanding of what the education system was all about, right? Whatever the discipline, well, I think we had this one based on what we know from the history of ideas. The conception in broad terms survived many countries in the West until the second half of the 20th century, when the whole reason for the existence of the university and even scholarship itself became unmoored from this understanding. With the loss of transcendent concerns, traditions, and even the rules of logic came the evaporation rather of meaning and then intellectual confidence, eventually replaced by a comprehensive doctrinal ferocity that would have shocked the medieval mind. Now, I think what essentially happened here, and this is my opinion, is that when we moved away, when Western societies moved away from the notion that there is a God, there is a superior being greater than anything, including science, then is when we begin to deify science, and science became the new religion or the education, whatever the sciences, whether it's social sciences or the natural sciences, right? That became the new religion, right? So that is what people say, and that's what they'll say, trust the science, right? We need to trust the science because science is, in fact, God has replaced God. And man now becomes vain, right? Because he thinks that anything he says is true and should not be contested because God is God. And because he's infallible, he says, there's no other God like me. There's no one like me. So God cannot be contested. Whatever God says, it says, thus saith the Lord God on high. But we cannot treat man like that because man is fallible, right? And he is a creature that makes a lot of mistakes, right? No matter how good he looks or how brilliant his work might be, it is faulty, right? And we can see where even Claudine Gay, in her day, she got a distinction for her degrees, her advanced degrees, and then we're learning now that she had some errors in citing her work, right? Whether that was deliberate, we don't know, all right? But it is human, and perhaps if all the works that have been done under the heavens were to be analyzed by God himself or by, another person or an objective person or persons, we would see that our work has lots of errors in them. These days, it is not even clear why the university exists. Is it vocational training? The rigor of professional certifications seem to cover that in most industries. So people get lots of certificates. We don't know if it's for training, for work. I say that it's for training. I think that the university is geared towards training people to take up jobs. It's not there for education, whether you're getting advanced degrees or not, right? It's there to promote institutions and industries and to indoctrinate you into believing what they believe in. Is it purely for the sake of gaining knowledge, right? And this is what it used to be. There should be a balance between gaining knowledge and training. I believe in that, right? Because we can't just say that we should go to university just to gain knowledge and how do we use the knowledge? And I think that is also another extreme, right? So I'm not to the extreme right or extreme left. I think that the university should be in the middle, where yes, it's challenging different knowledge and knowledge bases, but it's also training you to do a particular job because that's the world we live in and we have to be practical, right? Right? You can't go to turn up as an engineer with all of your philosophies of engineering, but you can't really do the job, right? You can't design a project, which some universities are like that. I think in the Caribbean, for example, we have a lot of universities that do that, right? They challenge you in terms of the theory, right? So they're very good in terms of giving you a thorough understanding of the theories in your particular field, but they're not good in terms of merging that theory with praxis, with the real life. right? And that is where I think we need, that's the highest form of education, the creative form. You know, I learned that in college, that, you know, when we say there are three levels of thinking, you know, and we talk about the literal and we talk about the figurative and the critical, and, you know, and, but there is also the creative side that sometimes we leave out, right? It's from the critical, you move to the creative. You have to be able to invent, the creative or the inventive, right, side, which sometimes many of us, including myself, if one should admit, lack. All right. The internet makes that available for free. Is it to delay adulthood for as long as possible and socialize students into a more ideal circle of friends and contacts? So he's asking, what really is the purpose of the university? Is it to give knowledge? Is it to train people for industries? Is it just to delay the growth of an individual as he moves from adolescence into adulthood, just to, you know, occupy some times before he gets to that final step of adulthood? Maybe, but what does that have to do with intellectual life? Or is it merely an institutional sinecure for privileged elites to export unconstrained visions of how a society in which they are not mainstream participants should operate? And that's what Harvard is all about, and the Yales, right? They're there to indoctrinate the elites into the framework and how they are going to take up important positions in politics and other spheres of human life, right? It's not really there to educate. Now, should you not send your children there? Of course, if you have they're getting scholarships and other grants and so forth, send them by all means. And it's also a very great way to, you know, get yourself into a job. But don't believe that these Ivy League schools are going to educate in the way how your children should be educated. They are not, right? Oftentimes these, you know, spoiled brats, right, don't even understand what the realities are. Most of them don't. Of course, you and I would, because we've lived in other realities. Many of them have not lived in any other reality, but the reality of being an affluent, spoiled brat, right? And that is what we have to understand. Now, when we talk about even the fact of plagiarism, you know, bereft from that conversation, absent from that conversation, I should say, was the notion that many of these people who, or some, I should say, I wouldn't say many, but some of these people who attend elite universities don't even deserve to be there. No, but it's by notion of their family members that they go there, right? And let us say now that many of them don't deserve to be there because they don't have that intellectual acuity, right? They are not intellectually sound, but they do get there. How do you think they come out of those universities? You know, I'm sure they are helped by their professors, if truth be told, right? And you have exams being passed to them before the exam, you know, is given. I'm sure that happens in all universities, right? Some bribery and all of those things. As I told you, in 2018, there were a series of publications of yeah of the fact that universities like Stanford and Harvard too, you know, and some other Ivy universities were, you know, admitting Chinese students who paid loads of money to them, to be there, some of whom perhaps did not have even the linguistics, you know, understanding, the linguistic dexterity to be at these universities, right? But they went nonetheless because they were filled with money. Sure, if that happens, if they admitted them in that way, right, in that light, it means therefore that they will do things to get them out of the universities too, including in some forms cheating, because bribery is cheating, right? And all of that. And if people can do that, you know, to get money, then they will do anything, right? Including writing papers for people. And there are things, even among professionals, where you have ghost written papers, even in the scientific realm, right? We understand that a lot of the things that go into journal articles in these scientific journals sometimes are ghost written, and they're not written by the people that they say they're written by. So Claudine gave, by no extension of, by no figment, you know, by no stretch of the imagination, I should say. Sometimes I forget my, you know, expressions, right? By she is not by any stretch of the imagination the only person that plagiarizes in these, um, you know, universities. And we've got to understand that. And, let's not just run with every little thing that we hear published in the media and begin to say, oh, it's because she's Black, right? And she's not deserving of her job. Many whites in our universities, so-called white people, are not deserving of the positions that they hold, whether they are at Harvard or they are University of Pennsylvania. It's politics, right? That counts, right? It's politics that governs the running, the operations of our universities. Even in terms of publications, do you know that? Even in terms of publications, it's politics that governs this. You have to play the politics with them. And sometimes you have to publish what they want you to publish in the vein that they want you to publish in, right? So this is what we're saying, that Claudine Gay is not the root cause of the problem. She is the symptom of the problem. In the same way, Trump is not the root cause of the America's democracy in crisis. Let's put it that way, right? Trump is not the root cause of America's democracy in crisis. He is the symptom of a democracy that has been in crisis for a very long time, right? And, it's just beginning when people say, oh, it's Trump, and we have to punish Trump, and afterwards we take him, if we take him out or we don't allow him to go back to the American presidency, democracy will remain intact. That is nonsense. That is a lack of understanding of how the US political machinery works, right? So we have to get out of that frame of thinking. Now, we have certainly lived through the decline and fall of the older idea of university. Now, we may yet live to see the end of the university itself and its replacement by something else entirely. Reforms can work, but the reform will not likely come from within the institutions. They must be imposed by alumni and perhaps legislators, which are also the same people who are, who come out of these institutions, and many of them are indoctrinated in the same manner. So I don't think they are going to necessarily be of any great assistance here. Now, or perhaps the rule of go woke or go broke. And I hope you understand this. This is the whole matter is like publish or perish, or go woke or go broke. So if you don't conform to the university's thinking and thought processes, you will have to leave because they will not tolerate you. They will begin to say that you're anti-intellectual and that you're creating problems among the students. So for example, in the left-wing universities, these liberal universities, if you don't say that a man and a woman are the same, then you can't get your degree because you have to say that women and men, they're not biologically different. They are just, it's a social construct. It's not in any way rooted in biology, right? That is the understanding that is coming out of these universities. And I was a part of the university system. I went through as a student and I also taught there. So I understand the dynamic and the modes of thinking that govern, that are prevalent at these universities, right? And it is something that is very sad. And you know what is happening? That even students who are unintellectual, the ones who are not great thinkers, they're the ones who get their PhDs, fast, and they move them through, right? Because they conform, they're conformist, and they will not challenge the system. They are not any threat to the system, right? So you find that people like me and other people who think and whose understanding of what university education entails should be one of enlightenment, to enlighten the mind and to allow to allow different thought processes to contend and to converge, right? Then you will find that my way of thinking is not going to be tolerable at the university, right? Because I'm a thinker, can't help myself. That's what I do, right? I love to think, right? And, I think that is what the professor should be, a person who's constantly thinking and interacting with different frames of knowledge, different ideas, but one who is also rooted in principles, rooted and grounded in, conscious and sound principles. Now, we are in the transition, as he's saying, and David Barnheiser is our virgin to give us an understanding tour, or an outstanding tour, rather, of the wreckage left behind, and perhaps even a path out of the darkness. So I'm also, I'm not being paid to do this, but, I'm recommending this book to you, Conformity Colleges, The Destruction of Intellectual Creativity and Dissent in America's Universities. Now, if this author hears, what is this video, and you want to send me a complimentary, um, you copy, what you call it now, soft copy, electronic copy rather, of the book, I'd appreciate that. Yeah, because I'd like to also delve into the ideas that he is advancing about the university. Thank you so much for joining. It is a wonderful opportunity again to have been with you to talk about another important matter. Remember now that reading is empowerment, right? It's an empowerment of your brain, of your mind. Just like we cannot survive without the physical food, we need also, right, to feed our minds on healthy intellectual food, right? Because the truth is truth. The truth cannot be changed, and the truth will set you free. Thank you so much for joining. All the best.